So, how does Ubuntu impact as a group philosophy? Hi, I'm Louise Fouché from OTGrow. Welcome to our YouTube channel. And this is part five and our last part of our series on Ubuntu, which is the golden thread that's going to carry us through the rest of the year. And it's using Ubuntu as a guideline, as a philosophy, as a way of thinking around groups, and also making it very practical because one of the biggest criticisms around Ubuntu is it's a nice idea, but it doesn't work anywhere. And we want to say from OTGrow side, it can work fantastically if you understand it and how you can facilitate it as part of a group. And we'd like to welcome for the last part of our series again, Michael. So welcome, Michael.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for having me.
All right, so let's just bring everything to a close. So we've unpacked Ubuntu a little bit and what it means or whatever, but I think maybe one thing we haven't really hit home, and that is the idea of why are both necessary? Why is the individual? Because I think there are a lot of people that unfortunately have this thing, I've got to be strong, I'm independent, I can do this on my own, it's what I say that counts, and why should other people hold me back? I think there's a lot of that thinking going around. And what do people miss by not realizing that they are part of a we, I am because we are. They're so focused on the I am that they actually don't see the need for the we are. So maybe you can highlight a little bit of that, Michael. What are they missing out on?
So I think let's start with the group as such. I think when you are doing groups, you have not just a bunch of individuals, but you have a thing that is bigger than the individuals themselves.
Yeah.
We often in OTGrow talk about how the group is the X member. So, if you've got a group of six people, the group itself is so big and so dynamic that it becomes a seventh member of the group in a certain sense.
Yeah.
And that's what you're missing out. So when you look at something, for example, like DBT groups, you have a group, but you are facilitating individuals in the group. You're not facilitating necessarily the group as a whole, the group dynamically between each other.
Mm.
And so what ends up happening is you're just facilitating a bunch of individuals in a room together. And I think this is where Ubuntu comes in, is this understanding that I am because we are. So unless there's a group, I'm really not part of anything. I can go through life unsupported, whatever, independent, but I'm not part of anything. I'm a lost soul, as it were. And I think this
Oh.
is yeah,
That is
this
so
is
beautiful, that concept of you're a lost soul when you're really on your own. I think there's something about, I mean, we can talk about the very practical things like, you've got blind spots and there's never going to be anybody to show that out. You're not going to grow as a person when you're always on your own because you can't see those things, your prejudices, your stereotypes. We need people to show those out, but also, I light shadows. We are not going to become aware of the things that really make us very unique, or that people say, "Wow, did you realize you're a XYZ?" Because those are the things we don't necessarily see. So I think there's that component that we do need other people. The second component for me, I think, is that we're social beings. We are constantly seeking connection. And when we don't have that, it actually comes to a place where it starts affecting our mental health. And we think we're strong and independent, but we are wired to be part of something, of a community. And I think that, in this pandemic of mental health crises, it's strange that people don't always see that link, that if I was part of something, it might not be so hard. And I think that brings me to another point for me is that we're all needing to be some part of something bigger, because that something bigger allows us to carry things that almost feels so heavy as individuals to bear. Richard Rohr wrote a beautiful, his latest book about is it everything, something about tears? Oh gosh, I've forgotten the title. Anyway, but it comes down to when we cry, we don't just cry for ourselves, but we cry for humanity. How, we're all part of a bigger, and we can't really escape that and be totally healthy and go be on the path of individuation, which is individuationally called, but we can never really reach it if we don't plug
I,
into this we are.
you can't be fully you if you're
Yes.
not fully part of the group, and you can't be fully a group unless everyone is uniquely themselves. And I think
Wow.
this is what Ubuntu, just come back to what Ubuntu means is it's the humanness. And so we can't be human only individually, and we cannot be humans only in a group. We have to maintain both. And I
Mm.
think that this is exactly that thing. When you cry for humanity. Yes, you're crying Ubuntu. You're crying for the humanness that is lacking. And I think this is where we need to be both.
Sorry,
Because
Michael, I've just remembered the title, The Tears of Everything, I think it's called, the book. So sorry, okay,
no,
carry on. I
all
didn't
good.
want to.
It's okay. So I think what we end up saying is that if you're just a group, you lose out on individual voices, you lose out on individual insights, you lose out on a voice of change, a different perspective. And I think I saw this quite well in the example that someone gave about a man who was in a group of women. And the insight that that group came into was that they were struggling with GBV. And the insight from that one man was inside every man, there is a hurt 6-year-old boy. And it wasn't to give an excuse to men's behavior, but it brought an insight that allowed the group to view GBV from a different perspective, allowed them to take accountability for how they were treating their own sons
Yeah.
in this GBV climate. And I think this is that one voice would not have been there if the person shrank away,
Yeah.
if there was no man in that group. And I think this comes back again to maybe something that's very important that we haven't necessarily discussed, is that the more homogeneous your group,
Mm.
the less likely there's going to be for massive change, because there isn't a different perspective, there isn't a different
Yeah.
insight. And even though everyone brings a uniqueness to the group, it doesn't necessarily allow for change. Whereas the more kind of heterogeneous your group,
Mm.
the more different your group, the bigger the insights, the bigger the change, because there are constantly different perspectives. You might have someone who's a black lesbian and a white lesbian. You might have someone who's transgender, and you might have someone that is cisgender. And these things change perspectives, and in their perspectives, in their intersectionality, in all of that, it makes the group stronger. And it allows the group deeper insight, and it allows for more healing to take place.
Yeah. And
Um,
still bringing it to the humanity of it all. Each
exactly.
person, doesn't matter where they're coming from, has a humanness and a value to that. I want to quickly move over, Michael, so we spoke about people thinking, I can do this on my own. But I also want to speak to people who think, what, I'm part of a group. They kind of hide away behind the group. The group gets to decide. The group is never held accountable. There's one or two people, strong people in the group, and I just feel, what, the collective is more important than me. I want to talk a little bit about that part of it as well. Is there something you want to speak to? What's the group missing out on when they actually don't realize the group is made up of these individuals?
I think what happens is that the group can't grow. So where previously we needed the group to grow the individual, when we're missing the individual, the group can't grow.
Wow.
again, coming back to that example of the one man in the
Yeah.
group would have been stuck
Yeah.
if that man was not in that group. There's multiple examples that I can give. Another example that I've heard is about a elderly woman and a young man. And the elderly woman was saying, "How dare you be so lazy and whatever." And the young man was saying, "Well, you're old and prudish and you don't understand." And what it came out is that the old woman was acting exactly like the young man's mother, and he was felt very taken aback and offended by this. And she saw her grandson in this
Mm,
young man. And it was only by being part of the group and facilitating the group and those individuals within the group that the group could go to a next level.
mm,
They were keeping the group at a stuckness,
mm,
and it was only once they, as individuals, received from the group what they needed
mm.
to move past those conflicts in their lives, past their shadows, into a different way of thinking, that the group as a whole
Yeah.
could think differently and move to a next stage.
So
Um,
it's almost coming back to that example of, so how am I treating my 6-year-old son?
exactly.
That voice of the man who made the whole group aware of something they would not have, and now saying, okay, but then what does that mean for me? And allowing the group then to grow. So the individual voices are needed, and we're almost back to the symphony orchestra. It doesn't help we're all violins. It's just going to be really, really boring. And so each person needs to step up and be fully themselves for this orchestra to almost really have the truest sounds, and yet not being the conductor, because the group needs to find their vibe, their rhythm, their speed, their voices, which is that's where the metaphor ends almost. But how important that collective and the individuals finding their voice, being fully themselves in allowing the group to grow.
Finding their harmony,
Ah, yes.
finding their harmony within Ubuntu. That's it. And I think that's what it comes down to is harmonizing with one another. And it's only once everyone is in harmony, or when everyone is co in a state of cohesion,
Mm.
that the group can go where it needs to go.
Yeah. And
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 it's
we're
own.
talking again to clarify here, Michael, we're talking about not
Mhm.
harmony as in we're always okay with each other and we don't want to upset the peace. That's not what we're talking about
Mhm.
here. It's actually where we feel so in touch or connected or vibing with each other, if you really want to put it in layman terms, that we actually can disagree with each other and we can have a conversation around these difficult things, because the greater container, the group, can hold all of this. We don't have to shy. I can tell you that that's not my perspective. I can ask you about yours, because I know that I have a value as an individual in this group, and you do too, your humanness, and so we can have a discussion.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is where to a degree, I think groups work so well in South Africa, especially of the interactive group model, is because we're not scared of going to those places of conflict and confrontation.
Mm,
Whereas, I've done a stint now in Europe, and I can see that people here are shy away from conflict. They don't want to offend anyone. They don't want to, but
mm,
in so doing, they and maybe this is exactly also part of being so part of the group that you lose your individuality, is that they can't move. They
yeah,
don't want to offend. They don't, but what's happening inside them is they're holding prejudices, they're holding conflict, and it eats away at themselves to the point that if we move from forming into to storming on day three, now all of a sudden, oh, is that day three? No, I wish I had more days. And that's often
yeah,
something you hear here in Europe. It's
yeah.
just, oh, Whereas in South Africa on day one, I don't like you, you don't like me. Okay, let's facilitate that. And we can actually get further in the process exactly because people are open to conflict, because people are almost more authentically themselves there, I want to say. And so to tap into that, South Africanness, if you want to call it that, to facilitate those things and allow us to go there. Um, I think here in Europe, you need to, as a facilitator, do a little bit more
Cohesion building.
cohesion building and pushing from the sides to make it safe enough to go to those places. So,
But I
um,
think that's so
yeah,
beautiful that brings it actually all together. It's really about being authentically yourself with all your thoughts, feelings, prejudice, or whatever, and bringing it to the group. And where the group allows for that space so that the group can also have an impact on you and you can have a space where you find new ways of seeing things, feeling about things, allowing to be yourself in all of that. So the true spirit of Ubuntu.
exactly.
Yeah. All right, maybe one just kind of a closing sentence from your side, Michael, just to bring it all together.
Yeah, so I think the closing sentence is that I am because we are, and we are because I am. And in this humanness, we come to a group, we come as ourselves, and it is in so doing that we can start moving, um, not just when we are sick, but even um, in our okayness, it is okay to rely on others and it's okay to be yourself.
Mm.
It's okay to have
Wow.
Ubuntu.
Yeah, so maybe that's can be our invitation for our viewers to maybe pop in the comment, but which way are you inclined? More focused on your individualism, and it's hard for you to tap in the group or the society, community, whatever. Um, or are you more go with the flow? I don't want to, upset people. I don't want to cause ripples, and so, I'm more of a group person, and let's not ruffle feathers. But in the meantime, I'm losing some of my authenticness. So. Maybe in the comment, if you're feeling brave, you can put where are you on the Ubuntu, which one do you tend to favor? So this brings us to the end of our series, but not to the end of our theme. And we're going to be carrying on the rest of the year. We've got to some very exciting new trainings that are coming up that we want to encourage you. That's really going to hit home. The one is in collaboration with art therapy, where you actually can experience Ubuntu holding both sides, where you will be able to be allowed in a 3-day workshop the ability to do that. And then the second one is where we've collaborated with Huguenot College, and it's a short course for anybody that's in a leadership to be able to facilitate this concept of Ubuntu, whether you are a head of a department, whether you are a chairperson of a committee, where you can try and see how Ubuntu can be made real and facilitated in your group and not just a wonderful philosophical concept. Please go over to our website www.otgrow.co.za and go and have a look at more information on that. And so this brings us to the end of our facilitation discussion. Thank you very much, Michael, for being part of this. And to just leave you with the concept, if you're not quite bought on or sold on it yet, maybe in the next week to just allow it to germinate and just think a bit about it more. If you are sold on Ubuntu, maybe to try and see how you can facilitate it more in the groups that you are facilitating. And in the meantime, happy facilitation.